Welcome to the External Vendor Catalog Config for Trade Service Electrical. Today I'm going to show you how to set up and configure your external vendor catalog for use with the Trade Service Electrical data. The first thing we're going to want to do is go all the way to the top menu and all the way left to Products and then Setup. Underneath that you should see the External Vendor Catalog. Now as you can see, I already have a Trade Service Electrical set up, but I'm going to set one up from scratch just to show you how this config works. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to select New, and then it's going to give us a blank config. Now underneath Provider, you're going to want to just put TSE, all caps, one words, exactly like that. That's what the update is going to be looking for as far as a provider. Then we can give it any comments that are optional off to the right, like giving it a name. I'm going to call it Trade Service Electrical. Now you'll notice one of the first things that we want to do is get an inventory UOM. And this is a default UOM in case any of the item data is actually missing a UOM. This is going to be one of the places the system checks to see what that data needs to be set to. For class codes, I can just set it to a default of sold items, and I can always move the item and change it after it's been actually converted. I'm going to want to set my item sites, which are my warehouse records, to create all warehouse records because I have a multi-location setup. If you just had a one location setup, you could just select the one warehouse from which you actually wanted to conduct your conversion of items into. But I'm going to set ours to all sites. Then under the vendor, you notice you have a vendor type here. I'll just set those to normal, standard, or whatever your default vendor setup is, and then give it a terms. And the reason that we set up a vendor type and a terms is if we convert an item from the external vendor catalog and no vendor record exists, we will also create the vendor record. The next you'll notice the tax types. Now what I like to do is set all my items to taxable and the tax zone to any. This is going to make all applicable sales tax apply, and if you do have customers that are tax exempt, you can set them up with a tax exempt code that just charges 0%, but it keeps a record then of every item that should have had sales tax collected. Now off to the right, you'll see our sales order entry behavior of either create PO requests or create purchase orders linked to sales orders. You'll note that in the distribution version, if I set create purchase orders linked to sales order, then it's going to automatically create that purchase order. If I turn around and check create purchase requests for sales orders, that's going to automatically create purchase order requests. But on either one of these, setting the item to stock will mean that it will not create the purchase order by default, but it will leave an option open in sales order entry under the sales order item screen for you to actually check and create a PO as needed. Now, with that, we're also going to want to set the planning on this one. So if we click on the planning tab, we can set enforce parameters, and you could just give it a default value so that it has something inside of there. And we may want to set the MRP system, the planning system to MRP. And by default, we wouldn't want to give it any safety stock or group it in any way. We're just going to bring these items in and create them under MRP so that they're picked up for replenishments. The next tab will be the inventory tab, and you'll notice we've already checked stock on it, and then we'll need to give it a cost method. And we can set that cost method to average, standard, or job costed. For items that are converted, most distributors are going to use average cost, so I'm going to set mine to average cost. The control method, I'm going to set that to regular because the options there would be regular, lot, or serial control. And I can always change that config after converting the item if I wanted to make it a lot or serial controlled item. Then, of course, the planner codes. And I can give it a default planning code of finished products. So that way every item that I convert will automatically get added to that planner code. Then under cost category, this is for costing logging for the GL. I want to set it to a default of cost category 1 just to make sure that the GL captures those costs. Now I can also set whether or not my ABC information is updated automatically. So I could go ahead and do that, and I could set all these items to a standard ABC code and actually have a cycle count frequency assigned to them, where if I wanted to go ahead and give those a default, I could. Most of the time, I would just leave these set to 0, and then once the item becomes stock, then I would actually set a cycle count on it. The vast majority of these after your go live will be non-stock items and will not require that information. And of course, location. If you're using multi-location control, you may want to enable multi-location control. You can also set it to use the default location and set what that default location is if you happen to have one configured, and make it auto-release from those locations. On mine, I'm going to turn off multi-location control for all the items that I convert from the catalog. And then back to the planning tab where we have that already set up and configured. And so this is going to be your base configuration just to get your uh, external vendor catalog up and working with the trade service electrical data. Now you may note that during your implementation we may have two sets of converts. One where we're converting stock items, and then after go live we would primarily be converting non-stock items. So through your implementation process, you may want to configure this so it reflects more on how your stock items would be handled. And then once you get ready to go live, you can actually change this config, and everything subsequently would be converted as a non-stock item until the point in time you got ready to make that item a stocked item. So that concludes our video for the external vendor catalog setup for trade service electrical data.